This is television for the Isles of Scilly, brought to you with Worldwide Financial Planning, Truro and Penwith College, and the Scilly Lottery. From Radio Scilly, this is scillytv.com. A visiting travel writer is preparing a significant article on our islands. Jo Stockland is writing for the Sunday Times travel magazine, and we should get a good review. She travels frequently to beautiful holiday destinations and says Scilly has proved uniquely attractive, and she hopes to bring this out in what could be an influential article. Jo says Scilly is like nowhere else she's ever been in her professional or private life. And this must be one of the best recommendations for our islands as a holiday destination. When a professional travel writer is so smitten, she arranges to book her own private holiday within a matter of months of visiting. A St Mary's man's been on a mercy dash to pick up a priest so a family celebration can take place. The christening of baby Joseph Hicks was in jeopardy after the helicopter broke down and the company weren't taking any day trippers over onto Skybus. Mark Hicks has his own 35-year-old Robin 200 plane, which ended up getting used. All ended well when he went to pick up the priest and bring him over to the islands. 60 people have attended a meeting to form a group to oppose the Wildlife Trust's deployment of cattle and the use of ponies in maintaining the landscape. Originally, 900 people signed petitions from the spring opposing grazing and the use of electric fencing on the Wildlife Trust's managed land around the islands. Barnsley Ward presented the opening to the meeting. Some of the key players behind a new group, with him, are already on the grazing discussion group, which includes a spectrum of views about the Wildlife Trust policy and representatives from different land user groups. Supporters of this new group, Save Our Scilly, have been meeting after the grazing group for months now. Barnsley told the meeting that the Wildlife Trust proposal to erect electric fences on the island of Gew proved the last straw for many members of that grazing group, and that's why they decided to form a special organisation, Save Our Scilly. He told the meeting the most important species in Scilly was the human species, and the group needed to be recognised. They wouldn't go away, and they intended to campaign until all the fences and stiles put in by the Wildlife Trust were removed. One way forward would be to get people elected onto the Wildlife Trust and change it from within. Barnsley believes Prince Charles is aware of the disquiet. He read out a letter from the Prince's office which acknowledged some local concerns but suggested the grazing discussion group was the forum for debate. After a presentation of images and slides showing the effects of the burning of gorse and the placement of electrical fencing on the landscape, attendees were told they could donate cash to help the group with its organisation, and a bucket was placed at the exit for cash support. Richie Christopher tells Radio Scilly they hope to put together a committee over the next few weeks. The boss of the Wildlife Trust says he's disappointed the group's been formed. He's worked hard to try and meet protesters who've objected to their land management. David Moore says he's had a number of meetings to negotiate areas of concern. He says that ditching animal grazing for purely mechanical land management isn't really practical. David says the role of the trust would remain consistent, and even if objectors were elected on, they wouldn't be able to change the trust's aims and objective. The Navy dined with around 100 pupils from the Five Islands School. HMS Albion came ashore, and Bryce Wilby, the school head teacher, hosted a thank you meal for naval personnel after youngsters were fed and entertained on board the naval ship that came to visit the islands. Bryce said the youngsters got a detailed view of life in the Navy in 2010. Captain McAnally oversaw the transfer of the pupils to the landing craft and then to the naval ship. The youngsters with whom we spoke were full of enthusiasm about what they'd seen. Phoebe Kirkby was fascinated by the dimensions of the vessel and the accommodation within it. And Maddie Sibley learned that the ship of that size required significant investment. The female members of staff and manager Craig Slater from Barclays Bank in Hewtown dressed up in pink to raise money for breast cancer care. And they provided pink food in line with the Dress Up Pink campaign. In total, the Friday fundraising brought in £234 for the charity. The Porthcressa Schiller Shelter won't become a cafe. Plans to regenerate the Porthcressa area of St Mary's are being amended, following 90 written submissions from visitors and members of the public. The feedback follows 2 consultation events which drew 130 people. Well, the proposal met significant objection from businesses who didn't want the cafe installed in the shelter. They viewed it as a potential competitor. Council Chair Mike Hicks wasn't a fan. He says the plans for the rebuild will go ahead without the retail use. Also scratched from the plan, the wind turbine. There'll also be less pedestrianisation of the Porthcressa Square area, and there was a mixed response about lighting plans, so the idea to illuminate the sea wall has been removed, but lower level lighting in seating recesses will stay. One of the surprise consultation findings is that people don't want any more facilities offered for those with disabilities. The council claimed that response was surprisingly negative, and offering provision for less able-bodied visitors is not negotiable. 4 separate cheques of £585 each have been handed over to good causes on the islands. The St Mary's Lifeboat, the Precious Lives Appeal, Help for Heroes and the Air Ambulance have received cash from Sam James, Sam Stephan, Cameron Hicks and Ethan Badcock. The youngsters rowed over to Samson during the summer. Sam said he felt strongly that the Air Ambulance should be a beneficiary of the funds raised when the 4 friends rowed in their punts in August. Cameron said they learned a lot from their experience. One of the organisations that will receive cash is the Children's Hospice South West. Ethan Badcock said it was important to support the Precious Lives Appeal. George Tiedemann of the Precious Lives Appeal collected the cheque as a representative and said the lad's efforts made a real impact on him. And Cameron Hicks said that the RNLI, the St Mary's Lifeboat, was a worthy cause to help. Our island's dump is becoming a home to more and more feral, wild cats. And it's a problem too on St Martin's. Now Sarah Roberts, the veterinary nurse, is encouraging islanders to report clusters of the stray animals and neuter their own if possible to avoid a pussy population explosion. Radio Scilly received reports that 3 kittens were found seemingly dumped in a bin by the flats at Porthcressa. A woman who dumped cats in dustbins in Coventry made the national headlines when she was prosecuted recently, but Sarah says it doesn't look like it's a repeat of a malicious act. Councillors have discussed plans for future waste management that will eventually see a reduction in the size of the tip at Morwell, the so-called Morwell Alp. Consultants working for the town hall have found a German-made shredder and a Korean swing shovel. It's sizable equipment, and it will be brought onto landing craft to the beach at Porthmelon before it's installed. But before that can happen, and they can start reducing the height of the dump, they need to buy a permit, which will cost around £8,000. Councillor Chris Thomas wants to know what's going on with the weighbridge. Chief Technical Officer Neville Gardner told him they need to clear a space by reducing the existing waste before the weighbridge can be used. A separate report discussed by councillors has outlined suggestions for future waste management. It suggests it'll be more efficient to ship material to the mainland for recycling because we don't have the necessary means to deal with hazardous materials or recycling plastics here, and if we did recycle, the local market for goods would be limited. The report suggests a target of 30% recycling by 2015. The Duchy of Cornwall say they're pleased to have undertaken maintenance work that will protect one of our island's special nature attractions, our elm trees. The variety has more or less died out on the mainland due to the prevalence of Dutch elm disease in the 70s. The fungus carried by a type of beetle wiped out the tree on the mainland. Investigations have been launched into the state of the trees at the side of the Old Town Church adjacent to the hill between Hewtown and Old Town, after the trees appeared blighted. But Will Garrett of the Duchy of Cornwall says investigations have found them to be unaffected. Will says the trees have been cut back using the traditional method of pollarding. They've thinned out the top of the growth, this time for health and safety reasons. Will says they've been keen to protect the trees because of the rare nature of elms in the UK. Rockets have been launched from Porthmelon Beach as 21 islanders have attended a 4-day space camp over the half-term break. Mission control has been the Children's Centre at Carn Thomas. 2 members of staff from the International Space School Educational Trust came to the islands to deliver training and lessons all about space. Russell Wareham was one of the organisers. Our island's youngsters have spent the half-term holiday understanding the solar system, finding out about living in space, and learning about rocketry and propulsion. Corey Graham loved the rockets. Kagi Mompoloki enjoyed learning about making a solar oven and explains how you can heat up marshmallows using the power of the sun. Overall, Rhys Robson thought the learning was fun. From the council, Joel Williams said they had to put on an entertaining session of events, particularly as the kids were giving up their half-term break. And the council's Helen McGuinness says it was a good choice for the holidays.